What you're seeing for the very first time publicly is the DF-61, believed to be China's most advanced intercontinental ballistic missile that can target the continental US with a range of over 12,000 kilometers. But it's just a small part of a massive arsenal China unveiled today and designed to send specific messages to different audiences, warning the US not to defend Taiwan against China, to Taiwan that resistance is futile, to Chinese that they are invincible. But the speech of China's leader jarred because it tried to focus on peace. Take a look.
中华民族伟大复兴势不可挡，人类和平与发展的崇高事业必将胜利。今天，人类又面临和平还是战争，对话还是对抗？中国人民坚定站在历史正确一边，坚持走和平发展道路。
China's September 3rd PLA parade, which marks the 80th anniversary of Japan's surrender and the end of World War II, should have been about peace and somber reflection, but was instead an extravagant Chinese military fanfare, highly choreographed for the whole world to see. It aimed to flaunt the lethality of China's military through shiny new aircraft, drones, tanks and missiles. So why has China chosen this historic anniversary to hype weapons and fearmonger? How successfully is Beijing rewriting World War II history to advance its causes and expansionist claims? And what does hosting the world's pariahs, or so-called axis of upheaval, mean for the creation of a new world order? Joining us today are Yinping Su, National Zhengzhi University Department of Political Science professor. Also, we have Victor Chan, former BBC Chinese language producer, and Gemont Lalari, Institute for National Defense and Security Research, visiting research fellow and retired US Air Force Foreign Area Officer specializing in missile defense. A very warm welcome to all of you on the show today. China's once-a-decade military parade, the last such occasion was in 2015, commemorates the victory of the Chinese war of resistance against Japanese aggression and the victory of the global anti-fascist war. On September 3rd, we saw 70 minutes of what China state media said was 10,000 troops, 45 formations and hundreds of types of weapons, all made in China. Missiles, drones, air, sea and land, and tanks. Jet fighters and other advanced aircraft also flew overhead. And yet, despite all the military muscle flexing, China's state news agency Xinhua said the parade underscored China's, quote, even stronger commitment to peace and justice, and that China, quote, has always been a builder of world peace. It came after an extensive global campaign by Beijing, producing hundreds of hours of watch time on state and international media, this show included, as well as numerous state-backed exhibitions in China, documentaries and movies like Dead to Rights, a graphic portrayal of the Nanjing massacre. Here in Taiwan, President Lai Ching-te said the lesson of World War II is, in war,
战争没有赢家，团结必胜，侵略必败。
So, Gemont, let me come to you first. So, we saw that it was a massive extravaganza. Taiwan has calculated that, or estimated that China spent $5 billion, which is around about 2% of the defense budget. They shut down Beijing for the event. You know, there was probably a year or longer in the planning. So why has China invested so much in this? Why was it so important?
Well, first of all, as you said in the beginning, she had invited many leaders who happened to also be authoritarian. Not all of them, but many were. Particularly the North Korean leader, the leader of Iran, the leader of Russia, the leader of North Korea. All these countries' leaders are in the same place at the same time for the first time ever. So this is, also the authoritarian group, so to speak. Second, I think that this event serves two psychological warfare purposes. As you mentioned in the beginning, domestic and international audiences. But I would add to what you said by saying that the PLA, which is loyal only to the Chinese Communist Party, the message is it is strong and will maintain power and order both domestically and internationally. I think that's one message. And the interesting part of what happened today was, for the first time, the People's Armed Police were in the parade. Never before have they been. And those are the people that are going to be the ones who control riots or would be deployed to Taiwan. And then finally, I guess for the international audience, like you mentioned, China wants to project a powerful image, but they also want to sell arms. And so the message is, we got lots of toys, they're cheaper than the West, come buy them.
Professor Su, do you find any irony in China's message of peace, along with all of these weapons systems?
Yeah, it's definitely irony, and particularly across the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. So basically, there's no tools for peace, and actually it also shows that China always has different conception about certain kind of concepts like peace or democracy, right? So in this case, peace is achieved only if the opponent accepts all the conditions set up by China, or it just was defeated. So that is, I think that is the irony that China mentioned about peace in this event. Yeah.
Victor, interesting what Professor said there. Peace only comes after your opponents are defeated. I mean, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te wrote on Facebook, Taiwan doesn't believe in commemorating peace while holding arms. What do you make of them using the 80th anniversary of the end of war to essentially, as I mentioned in the beginning, fearmonger, hype weapons?
I think the message is actually targeted at the Chinese people instead of the Taiwanese people. Because 10 years ago, the Chinese has emphasized that the Taiwan unification is unpreventable. And after 10 years, the unification has not come in as a fact yet. That's my take.
Okay. Now, Jimin, let's go through some of the weapons. If you could just cherry pick the most significant ones for you and how they might play a role in the Taiwan crisis.
Well, I think focusing on the Taiwan crisis, or I would say potential war, the main weapon systems would be those that either deny Taiwan the ability to defend or deny the United States to get access and help Taiwan. So those would be the anti-ship missiles, the anti-air missiles, and in the case of Taiwan, the land attack missiles. A lot of missiles in this case, and the aircraft and the ships that could deploy them. So if you were to view the entire 70 minutes, you would notice that there were a lot of missiles throughout the whole program. And I would pick out, for example, the ones that could destroy aircraft carriers, the hypersonic missiles, or the ones that can launch and can maneuver and are difficult to shoot down.
So the DF-61 that we mentioned, what scenario would that be used in?
So obviously it carries nuclear weapons, and so that would be a bad scenario for everybody, especially Taiwan and the U.S. But in a wartime situation, there is a possibility that China could use nuclear weapons in let's say, a defensive posture. In other words, they could detonate a nuclear weapon in the sea, no one around, to demonstrate that they're serious about what they're doing. In a more escalatory way, they could use a nuclear weapon to detonate at high altitude to cause an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, which would destroy electronics immediately below it and around it. So those are slower versions or lighter versions of what nuclear weapons can do. But in a worst case scenario, they could launch them against any city in the United States, which would change the Taiwan quote-unquote crisis to a global war.
Right. And Professor Su, would you say that China's showcase of all its weapons, is this different, or how is this different to the US's peace through strength?
Well, for China, the peace through strength, actually peace through intimidation, or peace through, or peace under the dominance of China. But for the United States, I think the concept of peace through strength is rooted in the idea of deterrence. So it's fundamentally defensive.
The US is not planning to invade China,
Yeah.
but China is, it tells us it's planning to invade Taiwan.
Yeah.
Victor, we're here in Taiwan. a place where the president just recently announced an increase of defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2030 because of that existential threat by China. How are the Taiwanese people reacting to this kind of parade, which is directed at it partly?
I think the Taiwanese people are somewhat numbed, but not because of shock and awe. It's because we saw it before. And
so it doesn't change Taiwanese resistance?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because let's put it like this way, I think there will be more people thinking that this military parade is actually showing that Xi Jinping is still in power. And PLA is totally devoted to him. Fundamentally, Taiwanese people will say, oh, it's a huge military parade, but I have to work tomorrow. So let's move on.
Guillemot, you wanted to jump in?
President Xi used the word rejuvenation several times. And if you refer back to his previous uses of rejuvenation in the white paper on Taiwan, rejuvenation means that Taiwan becomes annexed to China. So he's sending coded messages in his speech that to tell the Chinese-speaking people, both in China and Taiwan and around the world, that he has not lost his goal of taking Taiwan, but he wasn't explicit in his threatening words. In my view, it was toned down, but it was still there.
And staying on you, G-Man, was there anything else significant in the tanks, the drones, the aircraft?
Well, from the U.S. side, I would say that the fact that they're showing new technology is very important to see where China is. I mean, obviously there's other technology that they didn't display, but what they did display is advancements in, for example, high energy lasers, microwaves, drones, stealth. These are all things that concern the U.S. and also concern Taiwan by the very fact that the weapon systems here in Taiwan are Western based, and so they also can become vulnerable as China develops its own technology.